So I want to do a quick video on a somewhat controversial subject because I got a couple of friends who I really love and they're really into the flat earth thing. And I'm not. I just can't really get into it. It doesn't make sense to me when it comes to describing the mechanism of the actual universe we appear to be living in. It's really frustrating sometimes talking about it. But knowing the people I know who are into it, I kind of understand why they love it. And a lot of it has to do with returning to the center. Because in a certain sense, we are centered here on Earth. There's something reasonable about that. Right? And I'm going to start discussing some other things on this channel, one of which is the chart, the so-called astrological chart. I don't like that word, astrology. This is really just a configuration of the solar system from the point of view of Earth, because this is where we're living. We're not living anywhere else. We're living here on Earth. This is where the action is. And we look out there into the rest of, well, our solar system, for instance. We don't even see any apparent life. Maybe a couple of little traces of what might have been, or what, it's not much. Let's put it that way. Compared to what's going on here on Earth, there does not appear to be anything like that happening within our solar system. And we certainly have no idea what's going on elsewhere. Although we're doing our darndest to try to figure out how many other planets there might be out there that might have somewhat similar properties. But when it really comes down to it, we have no real tangible, direct, empirical evidence that there is anything like this happening anywhere else. Maybe statistically or probabilistically it's happening somewhere else, but we have no proof of that. So let's be clear about that. So with all the various far-out ideas that are happening in the world right now, it's kind of understandable that people would want to come back down to the ground. And it's like, yeah, well, it's happening here, so this is the center. This is where it's really at, right? That's kind of one of the basic ideas that a lot of people in the flat earth movement resonate with. And I think it's a reasonable observation that this is where it's happening, and all of the gymnastics that they go through to try to prove that that's the actual mechanism, that's where things get really crazy, in my opinion. But let's think about what happens in the Bagua with the trigrams. When we're thinking about a pure idea, you could say like a Platonic idea, something that exists purely within the realm of the mind, it's able to have balanced properties. But when we start to try to get the world to adapt to our idea, we're really shooting for a goal. We're basically, it's a desire. It's a belief. We're clinging to our beliefs. We cling to our desires. The same basic thing. We had a concept in the past. So remember, it's this model here. It's the past, right, that we want to bring into the future. And in the case of fire, take a look at, you've got the yin line in the middle. So we're willing to adapt to whatever we need to do in order to connect this idea that we had in the past. Well, over here it's in the past, right? Over here it's in the past. Because if you haven't followed this model to its full depth, you won't realize that these are not the same. They look like they're the same, but they're actually heading in the opposite direction. These two are the same, right? So it's this one here and this one here. That's the same because they're heading in opposite directions. So it's wind. Yin, yang, yang. Yin, yang, yang. Different direction. But of course, with a symmetrical trigram, it doesn't matter. Yang, yin, yang, same deal. What it's saying, though, is that something about the present has been let go of in order to try to make the connection between the belief and how it's going to play out. So that's kind of what we see happening within something like the flat Earth. There's a desire to hold to this belief, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that you have to give up, like reasonableness, in order to perpetuate that belief in the future because it's been materialized. So in some respects, it's like, because the mistaken idea is that the Earth is a material thing and we're talking about a mechanistic operation happening within the solar system, we go through this kind of crazy dance to try to support the idea. But let's actually think about, not that, let's think about what Earth really means poetically, particularly in the prenatal. So in the prenatal, we're talking about states of mind. In both of these, we're talking about states of mind. And in the prenatal, the root is Earth. Now, is it just a coincidence that it's called Earth? Because here, it doesn't just mean planet Earth, right? It means yin in all three positions. It means receptive, Earth. It means grounded in the Tao because you're a receptive vessel. And by becoming a receptive vessel, you realize the truth, I guess, is basically what you could say. Well, the truth that you don't know, that there's no way that you can know, that you cannot cling to it and find the truth. That all of our ideas and all the things, the objects that we hold in our mind, lead us into samsara, the cycle of suffering. And the only way that we can maintain a connection with what's actual and real is through the release of our ideas by embodying Earth. And by embodying Earth, we realize the prenatal arrangement. The mind states become crystallized. So there's another bizarre kind of coincidence here. I don't think that the flat Earth thing came from anything like this, but I'm just using poetry to try to reconcile something that is troubling because I have some friends who are into it, and I would like to find a way of talking with them about it without arguing with them about it. And I see that there's a poetic solution to that. That if they dematerialize their position and talk about it in spiritual terms, it makes perfect sense. This is the Earth. It's at the center of all things. Why? Because anything that's completely receptive becomes the center of the phenomena that's falling into it. It's like a black hole, right? And so the most eminently receptive thing becomes also, well, black body radiates, right? So because it takes it all in, it also streams forth. And that's why Earth is the cornucopia. It's the womb that constantly is giving birth to creation, right? So heaven enters Earth, right, and produces water. That's actually one of the images that's used in the Taoist meditation. So in the state of Earth, heaven arises within. The yang naturally comes in and fills the present moment because, remember, these other two positions, the past and the future, these are just objects in the mind. So maintaining the Earth position means that you've released the objects of the mind, including the one in the center position, which means you release your sense, your attachment to sense, and that summons heaven and fills it with the water, you could say the sacred water, of life. And that's why they call it the great elixir. So this practice is referred to as the Great Elixir. And I think one of the videos I'm going to make soon is going to be about how you can correlate some of the ancient Taoist texts to this. There are a number of Taoist texts that refer to the trigrams, in particular Chengpo Chuan and Liu Ming. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing those names. That's the best I can do. So we'll explore this a bit more, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Oh, the other thing that's interesting to consider, it's called flat Earth. And when you look in the mind, it's very different than looking into space. So if you open your eyes and you look into space, we have what we call 3 dimensions, which I think is a little strange in and of itself, but there's this depth, right? In the mind, it's a little different. I think that the mind is more like a screen. At least mine is, you know? I see things, but I don't feel like I'm in a room. I feel like I'm looking at a screen. Now, I might have some kind of an internal vision that appears to have some depth to it, but it still feels like it's happening on a screen. It doesn't really feel like I'm in the space in the same way that it does when I have my eyes open. So what I'm saying is that the mental space is kind of 2-dimensional, which means that it's flat. Now, I don't know if anyone agrees with that, if that's something that other people experience as well, but it just has occurred to me that there is a certain way in which mental space is flat compared to the physical domain. So, I mean, you could say that it's, how do you say this? It's a realm of representation that things don't literally pop out of until we interpret it and create a gesture, right? So things don't literally pop out of the mind into the real world. It requires that we go through all kinds of things in order to produce something, even if it's just a gesture. Think of all the various muscles that have to come into play in order to move something. In the mind itself, things don't just pop into existence. You could say that maybe that's what God's mind is like, where things just pop into existence. But all this is just to say that if we think of this as a spiritual practice and a spiritual understanding of things, there is something, the 2 people who I know who are really into the flat earth thing are very spiritual people. So they have a kind of accuracy in their spiritual way of being, not so much scientifically. But there is a certain underlying truth, and I think that this is a pretty good way of bridging it. You know, my hope would be that people who are into flat earth ideas might reconsider what it is that they're talking about and realize that actually the concept works better when you're talking about spiritual matters, like this planet is the one that matters. Let's not put it on the sidelines. We're all living here on this planet. Let's not put our attention elsewhere and think that that's more important. Let's maintain this as the center of what's going on because we need to care for this place. We need for this place to be the place that's good for us. And it does seem that there's a correlation between the Copernican revolution, where the Earth lost its position as being the center, and a kind of rapaciousness with respect to humanity's attitude towards the environment. And I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but it kind of makes sense that, you know, the more that we started to think that the Earth is just one of countless planets and that somehow or another we're going to get out there, like Elon and Bezos are going to get us to some other planet because we've pretty much used this one up. It reminds me of a bumper sticker I once saw in a composting toilet, I believe. It was a bumper sticker for the radical environmental group Earth First, and it said, "Earth first, we'll fuck up all the other planets later." So it may well be that our scientific understanding of the cosmos has loosened our commitment to taking care of this place that we're on right now here, where we actually exist. And we have absolutely no proof whatsoever that we could ever really exist anywhere else. Because really, it's like taking an organism that was designed for one particular, if you try to get tomatoes to grow in the desert, actually, I've heard tomatoes do pretty well in the sand, although they have no nutritional value. But, let's say you try to take lemons and grow it in the Arctic, something like that. I'm sure someone could figure out a way to do it. You'd probably need a greenhouse. It's really not a suitable environment. Things tend to do well where they're found. So living organisms, as far as we know here on Earth, what are the real chances that there's another planet like this one? Maybe it's a little bit like this one, but how much like this one? And like we know how uncomfortable we are when the temperature is just a little too hot or a little too cold? Do we really think that we're going to be able to find another place that's set up? Or are we just going to have everything being a technologically mediated environment? I know that's the way a lot of people are thinking. Even here on Earth, that's going to be our solution to all the gigantic mess we've made of it here. I just don't see that as being a wise way of going about it. This was the place we were given to take care of. And we really have not done a good job. Is it too late? I don't know. Maybe it is. But if it isn't, then we have to start thinking correctly. We have to get back to the understanding that this is the center for us. It doesn't matter if the sun is in the center of everything else. It's an important fact, let's say, that the sun it explains what's going on. But really, Earth is in the center. It's the center of our lives. And all the forces of the universe are coming to bear on this place. It's not coming to bear on this place alone, but we're here. So the thing that's happening to us is the force of the universe coming to bear where we are. And this is where we are on Earth. If we were on another planet, all the forces of the universe would be coming to bear on that as well. But that's not where we are. We're here. We're here on Earth. So Earth as the center, it's a little bit different from the concept of flat Earth. But Earth as center of our spiritual being. So now we're talking about Earth as a state of mind, right? Where all mental states are able to be balanced by their opposites because we take the position of not, when objects arise, we balance them with the opposite. When desire arises, we balance it with the opposite, which is sense. Right? So when we get joyous, ebullient, we flip to the past. Right? And eventually, when we do this cancellation, particularly with these 6, right? That's really what it is. We will slowly, the thought objects will subside, and we slowly embody this receptive state. And it's that last one where maybe what we're able to do is we're able to stop the objects in the past. I'm sorry, that would be over here in the past. And we're able to stop the objects about future, but we're still having the main line of sense being a distracting influence on the mind. And when we're able to sever that and actually sit in here, then it all crystallizes, heaven comes down, boom. Quite beautiful. The gold elixir. So, there you go. That would be Earth in the center. And because it's happening within the mindscape of consciousness, it has a, let's say, flatness to it. I recently had an exchange with someone in this physics community about this bizarre thing. They talk about flatness of space, which is a very annoying term because at the same time they're talking about 3 dimensions within space. So space has this characteristic of being both flat and 3-dimensional. That is what they're saying in physics. So it's no wonder. And, you know, they have a reason because they're talking about a different sort of thing when it comes to flatness. Flatness has to do with the overall shape of the universe. So they think that there's a value to curvature, and that depending upon what that value is, you would either get a flat or non-flat universe in essence. But flat is, you know, it's an unfortunate thing to choose that as a term when you're talking about space, which is supposedly 3-dimensional, because flat suggests 2-dimensional, doesn't it? So that's the kind of infuriating thing that's happening within the terminology of the sciences that leads people to embrace ideas like flat Earth, if you ask me, because there's a certain kind of nonsensical attitude within the sciences. It's like, well, if you guys are going to say stuff like that, then we're just going to say whatever we want to say also. I wonder to what extent that's what's going on here. Okay, I said it was going to be a short video, and I lied. I don't know how long it is, but I hope you found it interesting. And if you did find it interesting, I hope you will consider helping out by supporting this channel in whatever way you deem fit, whether that's something involving the links in the video description below that you can throw me a little bit of the currency of your choice, or if you just want to tell the world far and wide about how awesome this channel is, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening, thank you for viewing, and thank you for thinking.